I've recently purchased myself a 2013 Audi S4. This thing is absolutely awesome, but it has a few issues that we're still working on fixing. Now, I've actually already done a few improvements to get the car looking at least a little bit better. I found these awesome cheap 19s that still got a little bit of curb rash on them, but they look great. They're also wrapped in DWS 06 tires, so they're gonna give me a lot more grip. All in all, I've made pretty good progress with it, but there are still a few more things that, well, I need to fix. Yeah, I'm looking at myself on the camera. I'm not looking at the camera. But there are still a few more things that, well, we need to fix ASAP. As cool as this interior is, I do want to upgrade it a little bit to give me a little bit more enjoyment while I'm driving it. Today, we're gonna get into some maintenance and install a few more modifications to make this S4 that much more enjoyable. I have huge plans to tune and modify this S4, but before we do all of that, I need to make sure that all the major maintenance is crossed off the list. So old. More importantly, I need to take a deep dive into the engine and fix one of the most inherent problems these direct injection engines have. Taking a look at these 130,000 mile valves, they are actually quite dirty. But before we get into more maintenance, let me show you the first modification we're gonna be installing on my Audi S4. First up is arguably the best interior modification anyone can do with their sports sedan. This is a carbon fiber steering wheel from ECS Tuning. Mostly a cheaper and inexpensive item compared to a custom built steering wheel, but for the money, the quality is quite impressive and should do exactly what I needed to do. Next up is this S34 carbon fiber intake from 034. Not only is it a cost-effective intake, it's also going to improve the engine bay, and it comes with all the hardware I'll need to install it, including this carbon fiber heat shield shroud, 4-inch performance filter, and lastly a silicone hose which will mount directly to the throttle body, and that's going to enable the supercharger to suck in as much air as it possibly can. While we're there, we might as well do an oil change with liquid moly 5W40 oil and spice things up in the engine bay with a billet oil cap and a billet filter oil housing. Speaking of spicing things up, in preparation for huge horsepower, I'm going to be installing the 034 high pressure fuel pump piston kit. It's designed to be a drop-in replacement for the tiny OEM high pressure fuel pump piston and should unlock upwards of 50% more flow, allowing the fuel system to meet the higher demands for ethanol blends or race gas. Lastly, these are 034 bullet nose studs and nuts, which should make my life a lot easier swapping between my street tires and drag radials when the time comes. This S4 is definitely no slouch. There's another thing I just found that I just realized as we're filming. I don't know if I could really show this on video, but those are OEM engine mounts that are over 130,000 miles. What it feels like to me is that they're completely detached. Might have to see it in the next video. However, right now we have a ton of things that we need to do. The 3.0 V6 supercharged direct injection engines are very, very solid when it comes to reliability, but the biggest downfall is it falls victim to a terrible issue almost all direct injection engines suffer from. That's carbon buildup on the valves. In traditional port fuel injection systems, the fuel injectors spray fuel on the intake valve, which helps keep them clean by washing away the carbon deposits. However, in direct injection engines, the fuel is sprayed directly into the combustion chamber rather than mixing it with the air in the intake manifold, meaning the fuel never comes into contact with the intake valves, and this allows carbon deposits to accumulate over time. Once this carbon buildup becomes severe enough, it may lead to actual misfires, terrible gas mileage, and even a significant loss in power. And while there are many demonstrations online, let's take a look at the B7 4.2 V8 platform. Looking at 034 Motorsport's own website, they dynoed a B7 RS4 before and after a carbon cleaning, and the results are astonishing. Car gained 42 wheel horsepower and 26 foot-pound-feet of torque from a proper carbon cleaning. I'm not saying we'll gain that much horsepower, but I'm sure the difference will be substantial enough to actually be noticed. Well guys, it's time for some long overdue maintenance, and for us to get the carbon cleaning done and everything else that we want to do today, we got to pull the blower off, the intake, high pressure fuel pump, intake manifolds, everything has to get ripped out. We got to start from scratch. Let's get to it. trying to take off my supercharger belt, and we just discovered something. As we're trying to loosen it, it just kept turning and turning, and I'm like, wait a second, something's definitely wrong. That's a 130,000 mile tensioner right there. Look at this, guys. That thing is a goner. Wow. It has so much play, if you guys can see that. Well, it looks like we have some side quests that we need to do. I called Audi, they have one in stock. We're gonna run over and get it. I guess we have a lot more work to do than I thought we did. The entire front clip has to come off as well now. Hey. 130,000 mile tensioner. No big deal. Completely came apart. Look at that. To remove the OEM tensioner, there is simply one triple square bolt that's holding it, and the tensioner comes right out.
And for whoever says and comments on the video saying, oh, 130,000 miles isn't high mileage, well, all the parts.
Yeah, all the parts shred after 100,000 miles. Right, not high mileage? Sure. To handle the supercharger, I like to use 3/8 or 1/2-inch extensions. This makes it a lot easier to move around. Next up, I need to remove the intake manifold runners that sit right underneath the supercharger. It can be a little bit difficult to remove, but just pulling upwards usually does the trick. The injectors tend to come up as well, but I got lucky this time and didn't have to deal with that. This also would be a good time to replace the injectors as well, but thankfully they have been replaced by brand new OEM ones right before I purchased this S4. Now I made sure to vacuum up any debris underneath the blower as well. You can use any pliers to pull the port dividers out. They're also press fit and come out with minimal effort. As you can see, there's a ton of carbon buildup on these as well. Usually intake valve cleaner does work better, but since I ran out, we're gonna let them soak in a bath of brake cleaner while we work on cleaning the valves. Taking a look at these 130,000 mile valves, they are actually quite dirty. Taking a look at cylinder 1, it is very dirty. Cylinder 2 is a little worse, and cylinder 3 is by far one of the worst carbon buildups I've ever honestly seen. Cylinder 6, just as bad. Cylinder 5, it's all right, but could be better. Cylinder 4 is also just insanely bad. Quite surprising to see how bad this is, which is obviously expected, and I'm hoping that cleaning these up will help us free up that 20 to 30 wheel horsepower. Maybe I'm overestimating that, but we're trying to maximize every single part of this car before we start modifying it to make sure that it runs healthy and gives us the maximum gains that we can across the entire board. So carbon cleaning is definitely gonna help us with that. When you're cleaning your valves, you have to make sure that your valves are seated all the way up to make sure that none of those walnut shells or debris fall into your combustion chamber. So this is what we're gonna be using, this little crank tool. We're gonna put it on our 1/2-inch socket here and then turn the crank pulley going one port at a time. Before we get to blasting the gunky valves, just a disclaimer, this won't be a DIY, but if you want to support the channel and use the tools I do, go down into the description below and get yourself something for your garage. First up is hand scraping using small picks to try and scrape off any large carbon pieces. This will make walnut blasting much easier and faster to accomplish. For that, I'll be using the 034 direct injection valve cleaning tool to get the task done. It sits tight to the head of the engine and allows me to blast the valves with walnuts while sucking them right up into the vacuum. This job is definitely easier with a friend to help out as well. Moving the walnut blasting tool back and forth, I made sure to blast both valves to get all the carbon that I could. Now I just needed to repeat that process on all 6 cylinders. Once that was done, we need to clean the port dividers. Using a wire brush and some water, it was very easy to scrub the carbon off. Well, easy for me to hold the camera and make my camera guy put in the work. Now, let me show you the before and after, but make sure to rate my valve cleaning skills by commenting down below. Moving on, I installed the port dividers back into their designated spots. And of course, the intake manifold runners sit right on top. Unfortunately, sometimes I suffer from something called butterfingers, and this happens. With everything torqued to spec, and in the spirit of while we're in there, I decided to replace my valve cover gaskets due to them leaking oil. And you'll see why that was a good idea in just a second. To remove them, first I need to pop the coil packs out and then unzip all the bolts holding the valve cover down. I did recently learn a little trick from a mechanic friend of mine, and that's to spray brake cleaner on a piece of paper towel or cloth and then wipe down the surface of the engine, and that will clean all the gunk and ensure that the new gasket seals properly to a perfectly clean head. Prying up on this valve cover gasket wasn't easy. It was very brittle and kept breaking apart on me, which is why it was leaking in the first place.
Ripped apart. So old.
I cleaned up the valve cover the best I could, and with the new gasket installed, it goes right back on the head of the engine. I did repeat the same process on the driver's side valve cover as well. Let's move on to some of the actual fun stuff. These 3.0 Ts are very simple to change the filter on due to it being located right on top. New oil filter goes in with the new billet oil filter housing, and our first modification is officially installed.
That ain't going nowhere. That ain't going nowhere.
This engine does require 7.2 liters of oil, and we're using the best there is thanks to Liqui Moly 5W40, which I use in my B9 SQ5 as well. Oil is topped off, so let's install that billet oil cap. Ooh, that was satisfying. Listen to that click. Those are some beautiful pieces of billet. I know they're tiny accessories, but they definitely help the engine bay. I guess I realized I put it backwards because you could just, hey, now it's facing the right way. B-roll, roll it.
King.
Usually supposed to pull the fuse from the fuse panel, but I just like doing it the old school way. Just drain the fuel out, get all the fuel pressure out of it. Okay, that one. That's why you still have a rag there. Don't move your rags.
Holding the high pressure fuel pump in place are two M8 triple squares. You do have to make sure to loosen these bolts by alternating them so you don't damage the high pressure fuel pump housing. Now that the high pressure fuel pump was clamped in the vise, I could remove the spring retainer, the spring, and the piston itself from the fuel pump housing. I'll be using the 034 specialty tool to make this installation much easier. I did have to use some force to remove this retaining nut that holds everything together, and using some pliers, I pried upwards until the upper and the lower sleeve came out. And here's the old hardware compared to the new shiny hardware going right in. To install this piston properly, I'm simply working backwards. The lower 034 piston sleeve goes in first, then the fuel piston and the upper sleeve slide right in. Using the same specialty tool to secure the retaining nut, I torqued it to a speck of tight. Now the retaining clip goes back on and the high pressure fuel pump is officially upgraded.
This right here is a little cam follower that sits and it rides along the lobe of the camshaft. It just sits on top of the high pressure fuel pump and basically drives it. So for you guys that don't know, this is a camshaft driven high pressure fuel pump. If you guys want to buy any of the tools that I'm using, go down in the description below and get yourself something.
Moving on to one of the most simple mods anyone could possibly do on their Audi, that is an intake. And I've been quite excited for the 034 intake for quite a while now. Carbon fiber has always had a special place in my heart, so I can't go wrong with this one. And the installation is very simple, and 034 has instructions for anyone to follow to install the same intake. With a little bit more space to work in my driveway, I'm gonna install these 034 studs and nuts.
We need to change these out, you guys. These are bad. They are pretty much goners, and I have something coming for that pretty soon here.
Of course, they're very easy to install as well, and if you're doing studs, make sure you don't forget Loctite. Since we're doing this to make tire swaps easier, might as well see what the 17s with DRTs will look like on the car.
This is gonna be insane. Let's lower the car and see how at least one side looks like.
Yeah, buddy.
This car is gonna look insane on drag radials.
Oh, buddy. Oh, the poke.
Damn, that is sick. Now we just gotta do the same exact thing on all four corners of the vehicle.
think the best part about upgrading the interior of any car is a carbon fiber steering wheel. The second I bought my SQ5, I bought myself one, and let me show you guys what that looks like. Hey, buddy, are you driving, buddy?
Have you been drinking milk?
So we're gonna upgrade the steering wheel in my B8.5 to match my SQ5. This is gonna go on the wall, probably next to that steering wheel or something like that. I don't know, maybe like right here. Now that is more like it. That is a steering wheel. Look at this bad boy right here. Whew, sheesh. Man, this steering wheel looks insane.
Oh my goodness, bro.
Yeah, baby. Hands have to be clean because then I'll mess up the white stitching. But apart from that, I guess I just could hold onto the carbon fiber. That intake sounds really good.
Dude.
Let's go. It's not louder, but those engine mounts are not happy. Ooh. Okay, we're gonna replace the suspension either way. With the carbon cleaning being done, this should definitely help us with responsiveness a lot more, especially when you're down low. That's the biggest difference. And the responsiveness is definitely there. I'm not sure if the high pressure fuel pump did anything different, but it's definitely gonna run a lot better. Ooh, buddy. These B8.5s do not disappoint, and we have so much more work to do on it. For responsiveness, I mean, it is noticeable. It responds a lot better, and that was the goal of the carbon cleaning. I don't want to say that we gain more horsepower, but I do know that it does feel better. It revs out what it seems to me like a lot easier. I'm sure once we get those engine mounts fixed, it's gonna feel a lot better as well. But in the meantime, I am really happy where it's at. Well, and now that my responsiveness is better, the car is driving so much better, we got the fitment looking a lot better. I basically crossed off every single thing that I possibly could, and now it's time to add more horsepower. And for that, we're gonna flash horsepower straight from our phones. But it's got a few more things that we need to fix. I hope you guys stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.